Being an ally means that you know it takes many colors to make a rainbow. Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
I think it's important to learn Soji language to better support the youth.
At the beginning of class, I say to all my students, I say, okay, when we do names today, I'm still getting to know you. Can you tell the rest of the class what pronouns you use? Does everyone know what I mean when I say pronouns? And almost in like unison, they all kind of like roll their eyes back in their head and go, yes, we know what pronouns are, we get it, we totally understand. And I go, oh, okay. So I'll start off, my name is Mr. Adrian, and I use him and he pronouns. We go around, and without even skipping a beat, the students had no problem.
When you ask someone their pronouns and they tell you, they're giving you a little bit of insight into who they are. They're sharing something with you, and it's really important to listen. For people who think that it's too hard to use they as a singular pronoun, it's really important just to practice. Often for people when they're thinking about gender, there's fluidity, there's multiplicity, so sometimes they really is the right fit for a person. Intersecting identities means that people don't move around the world with one singular identity.
The concept of intersecting identities is really beautiful. Me being gay, an immigrant, and a person of color, and I can't choose one being more important than the other part of my identity.
A lot of these things intersect and really layer in terms of the discrimination that a youth may be facing, the stereotyping a youth may be facing, and if we know the full picture, we're better able to assess what this student might need in order to uplift them in the classroom and to really change their experience and empower them.
For me, the advice I have for educators coming in on their journey on all things Soji is to be really curious. I tell people all the time to stop and ask kids, who are you? Because teachers will say to me, what pronoun do I use when I'm talking to a gender creative kid or a gender fluid 17-year-old, and I say, ask them.
Being an ally means that you know it takes many colors to make a rainbow. Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
And so what I want to kind of put out there, and I think Sarah will be talking about this quite a bit, is that these lessons can't be seen in isolation. So it's, I think, a great starting point to use a book in the classroom to talk about gender identity, to talk about sexual orientation. But if we're restricting it to one little part of the day for students, it's not changing the culture of the classroom. It's not changing the language that we use in the classroom, for example, using boys and girls, which is, as we know, very pervasive. Every time that you say boys and girls, you are putting the students back into those boxes, back into that binary. Even something as simple as in a math problem, saying Tom and his two dads went to go buy apples. I don't know, something like that, where you're just kind of shifting the language a little bit to put it out there that there are many different identities and they deserve to be represented in the classroom, to not just create this one-off lesson that oftentimes serves to other these identities even further.
Right? It's crazy. But our students are inundated with that when they go into a toy store or a clothing store or a bookstore or anywhere. Boys' books, girls' books, boys' stickers. It's ridiculous, right? So they have to know, like, as our job is, they have to think critically about that. They have to think, is this okay? Why do girls have separate Lego? That's dumb. Why is all the girl Lego like this? They have to be questioning this. So we can't burn all the books in the library that are reinforcing these gender stereotypes that we have to start using, and in our staff rooms as well, and on PA announcements, and in assemblies, when I cringe when people are still saying, good morning, boys and girls, today at, it's like, oh, really? So you can change that culture in your school, right? We would never get on the PA and say, good morning, South Asians, and people from Latinos. We would never say that. We would never say that because it does not represent the diversity within our school's community, and it also reinforces stereotypes. But people don't think that with the whole girls and boys because we've said it over so long. That's how we were addressed, right? That's how a lot of people are still addressed. So we have to rethink the language that we're using. It makes a really big difference.
That gender-biased or homophobic language is not okay, including the phrase, "that's so gay," which the next slide kind of goes over some ways to talk about "that's so gay." So make sure you have your favorite response ready. "Oh, I have some friends who are gay and they're awesome. Do you mean that's so awesome?" Draw that racial religious parallel. What if we went around and said, "That's so Chinese," every time we thought something was terrible, right? What would people think of that? Do you mean it's stupid? Gay refers to a group of people, and they and their loved ones are all around you. Most of them, and many others, are offended every time they hear this.
Being an ally means that you know it takes many colors to make a rainbow. Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
The notion of sexual orientation and gender identity and variance or non-binary ways of being, that's still really new for some people.
So I know Soji terminology can seem a bit complex when you're just starting and learning about these issues for the first time. There's a few things that I always say. First of all, it's important to learn the basics. So language changes from person to person sometimes, but there's some terms that kind of apply across the board. I always like to start at the beginning, which is when a baby is born, often we look down at their genitals and we decide based on that whether that child is going to be a boy or a girl, right? So we assign that child a gender. So non-binary students are students who identify outside of sort of our traditional gender categories, right? So usually we think of boys and girls or men and women. And non-binary students are students who identify either in between or outside of these categories.
The term Two-Spirit, for me, it's just kind of a way of acknowledging that many First Nations communities knew and accepted the idea of gender fluidity.
But what it is I have two spirits inside of me, and one is masculine and one is feminine. And sometimes they conflict quite a bit, but or one outbears the other, but they're in there, and that's why they call us two-spirited.
Young people struggle with not only their sexuality, but also that kind of push and pull around race and faith. We have a lot of young Christian Chinese folks in those schools who are out and very proud to be themselves, but they might have parents who are, you know, really against the policy changes that are happening at their district level. How do we talk to them about their sexual orientation, gender identity without them necessarily having to abandon their faith or their culture and family?
To help students who are wrestling with gender identity or sexual orientation and put that together with their faith, it can be a real challenge, because often there were going to be expressions of faith that are anti-gay, anti-lesbian, anti-gender identity that is not binary. I think it is a little more of a challenge for those educators who come from a strong faith position that is not supportive of the LGBT community or gender identity, but I think they also then need to do some homework. Their first call is to be supportive and caring for the students that are with them, for whom they have responsibility, to recognize that they need not insist on their own religious beliefs, that they're in a setting where in fact they need to be open to all.
Being an ally means that you know it takes many colors to make a rainbow. Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
Talking about things like pronouns, saying, you know, these are the pronouns I use, this is why we're going to talk about pronouns. Figuring out those clever ways to integrate those things into their lessons. Are you talking about pronouns in your English grammar lesson? Here's a great time to talk about the they pronoun and how it was Merriam-Webster's word of the year in 2016 or 15, and this is how language has changed and evolved and why that's important, right? So just finding those ways to talk about gender when it comes up, and to really be leaders for their young people.
Well, I think a lot of students are interested in talking about homophobia or transphobia or LGBTQ2+ politics, because I think in general a lot of students just like current events. I mean, there's a lot of current events around bathroom rights, around other countries in the world where people are being executed or tortured for being queer. Textbooks written a while ago that are used in classes might not be up to date that discuss SOGI-related issues. And I think this is the opportunity that teachers and administrators have, is to bring in current events that are affecting students who might be trans or queer.
I think when we're talking about sexual orientation and gender identity in classrooms and in schools, it's more of how do we treat the subject with as much dignity and respect as we do any other kind of relationship. When we talk about, you know, whether it be kindergarten to grade 7, talking about home life and relationships between, you know, your mom and your dad. Maybe this child has 2 moms and maybe this child has 2 dads. It's the same thing. We're talking about relationships.
The way I approach these topics with early primary students often begins with a book. It starts with a story, for sure. It is in the curriculum for us to talk about family and family diversity, and that's a really natural way to talk about it. And at their age, 6 and 7, they're remarkably open and accepting if that's the tone that is set. So it's actually not as difficult as it seems, I don't think.
Don't be afraid to start with the younger grades. They are definitely ready to learn about, there aren't just 2 boxes, boy and girl, there's everything in between, and there are different types of families, and the kids are old enough to learn about that and to be accepting of each other's differences. Who's in your family?
My dog.
My dog, oh, so cute. A family can be made up in many different ways. Robin's family is made up of her dad, Clifford, and his partner, Henry.
Everybody loves to dress up in different ways. And usually in kindergarten, like right off the bat, the house center and the dress-ups are very popular. And many times I've had children who go and choose dress-ups that aren't stereotypical. And immediately I'm intervening and educating to help everybody be respectful and allow people to choose how they want to dress up and how they want to use their imaginations and how they want to express themselves.
There's people that are boys, there's people that are girls. There are people whose gender might be a little bit of both or might even be neither. All girls like playing with dolls. Is that a stereotype?
Yes.
Is it true?
No.
No. Boys don't cry.
What?
Girls don't play sports.
What?
That's ridiculous. Of course they do. Being an ally means that you know it takes many colors to make a rainbow. Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
Students feel sometimes a little nervous because this is quite a new topic. You know, and they're in my class, they're 12 and 13 years old, and they really haven't had this form of education in gender identity. This morning, we have a brand new book in our library called 10,000 Dresses. And we're going to be showing it to you on the screen up there. And my first question is, what do you think the story is about?
That looks like, that kind of looks like a dude in the dress. That could be a woman. You never know.
I think it's about a guy who wants to wear a dress, but maybe he's not allowed in his school and all he wants to do is wear a dress.
And I was wondering if you would buy me a dress just like that. Bailey, what are you talking about? You're a boy. Boys don't wear dresses. Okay, so we're gonna pause for the middle part, and you can write down some thoughts about how you think the character is feeling.
She's not like being accepted.
Yeah, I said Bailey's not feeling sad because no one is listening to her and accepting what she wants to do.
What would you say to Bailey if they wanted to wear a dress to school or they came to school in a dress?
I will tell her that she's not alone and there's probably other people in the school that are transgender or queer. And then I'll tell her that there'll be a GSA club so she can be herself there if she wants to come there.
One big thing that I've tried to take on this year is to teach a queer novel to my grade 9 class and to not preface it as such. If you've read the book, it takes, 2/3 of the book before you finally figure out that one of the characters is gay, and you don't find out until the very end that the other one is. And when I was doing it with my students this year, I was just so surprised to see how unfazed they were by it, how this was just, to them, something normal, something that was part of their life quite naturally. I think another big success is within PE. So in looking at the new curriculum, there's explicit language in there, not only for teaching about sex ed and sexual health, but specifically about identity and gender. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of different high schools around the district, and their PE departments wanting to learn about what can they do, who can they bring in, how can I support them.
So for a sexual health workshop to be accessible and inclusive, my goal is that everyone listening to the sound of my voice will hear their experience and their identity reflected in the words that I choose, in the examples that I use. They will hear that they are known, that they're seen, that they're important.
It's about finding creative ways, because really queer, trans, two-spirit representation can come up in almost any course as long as you just make a decision to do it and do that inclusive work.
Being an ally means that you know it takes many colors to make a rainbow. Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
Outrage is growing tonight after a Chilliwack school trustee posted a rant online blasting BC's new curriculum dealing with sexual orientation and gender identity. CTV's Nafisa Karim is live at the Chilliwack School Board office, where an emergency meeting is scheduled for tonight. Naf.
Scott, this is an in-camera meeting, which means the public is not allowed to attend. Barry Neufeld posted on Facebook on Monday, and in some of the comments, he's being called bigoted and transphobic, but he's not going to be removed from office.
I think he's absolutely wrong. He's on the wrong side of history on this issue.
He is longtime Chilliwack school trustee Richard Neufeld, who used a Facebook post to come out against the province's new sexual and gender identity program, writing, quote, "Children are being taught that heterosexual marriage is no longer the norm, and if this represents the values of Canadian society, count me out. I belong in a country like Russia."
Just tell us, why did you put that on Facebook?
No comment. I know.
Neufeld did not want to answer our questions about his post, which has hundreds of comments, many calling him bigoted and transphobic. School Board Chair Paul McManus says Neufeld's opinion is not shared by the board.
Being an elected official on the school board, you have to consider the things you say and the opinions you express, because people will mix the two up.
School Superintendent Evelyn Novak says Neufeld's comments came as a surprise.
Our board has not had an opportunity to discuss the whole idea of SOGI.
At issue is the Ministry of Education's Sexual and Gender Identity Program, or SOGI, which aims to discourage bullying and promote inclusion.
It's not acceptable to have an elected official violate human rights code of a province on the record in a public published statement.
But the minister won't remove Neufeld from his job.
Look, I expect his fellow trustees and the board chair will have a debate with him. He is absolutely in a very small minority on this issue.
Neufeld has been in office since 1992, and it appears he will remain there. One thing that has been removed, the post that started it all, it's now been taken down, and Neufeld's Facebook profile is no longer public. Scott?
Says it promotes inclusion, acceptance, and diversity. But comments to the contrary by one trustee are now prompting calls for his resignation.
He needs to step down or be pushed out, one way or the other.
Barry Neufeld ignited a backlash after posting on social media that he supports traditional family values and that allowing little children to choose to change gender is nothing short of child abuse. He accuses the province of forcing this biologically absurd theory on children in schools.
I don't impose my beliefs on anybody, but this program intends to totally impose its belief on all of public education.
The BC Teachers Federation calls Neufeld's post appalling.
It sends the message to children who might be coming out or who already are out at school that their school might not be safe, that the trustees that are supposed to be looking out for them aren't.
It's a topic that's not often brought up, and so it's new.
At the root of Neufeld's concern is SOGI 123, the province's toolkit to help educators talk about issues of sexual orientation and gender identity. SOGI upholds values already enshrined in BC's Human Rights Code.
I think he's absolutely wrong. He's on the wrong side of history on this issue. We're right to continue to try and eliminate all forms of discrimination and harassment in our society.
The province won't fire Neufeld. His fellow trustees want to hear from him.
I think if he made an apology and retracted his statements and learned a little bit more about how hurtful his statements are, I think that
could go a long way.
The board is meeting in the next couple of days to determine its actions, and we'll want to speak with Barry.
They also want to reassure parents all students at Chilliwack schools are accepted.
Barry
Tanya Beja,
Neufeld
Global
is
News.
facing a storm of criticism.
I have been called names. I've had my life threatened. I've been called an old dinosaur, a religious fanatic, superstitious, homophobe, you name it.
Neufeld has posted this on Facebook, a lengthy judgment of BC's new inclusivity program called SOGI for sexual orientation and gender identity. Neufeld calls it a weapon of propaganda. He asserts that teachers must not refer to boys and girls, they are merely students, and they cannot refer to mothers and fathers either.
I have spoken to school principals, people from the ARC Foundation. That is actually not true.
Also on Neufeld's post, a photo depicting parenting 20 years ago compared to now. The 2017 caption of the child says, "Mom, I think I am supposed to be a girl." The mother's response, "Okay, sweetie, we'll start hormone treatment immediately."
I don't impose my beliefs on anybody, but this program intends to totally impose its belief on all of public education, and I think that's going to create a new target group for bullying.
In Langley, parents have rallied in favor of SOGI, saying it supports marginalized students and combats bullying, making schools safer.
It's about inclusivity, and I wonder what kind of society we're living in when trying to be inclusive is such a problem.
The Facebook post has prompted hundreds of responses, both critical and supportive. The Chilliwack School District has told Global News Neufeld was not speaking on behalf of the board, and because this is a personal Facebook page, trustees can say what they want.
Being an ally means that you know it takes many colors to make a rainbow. Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.